Welcome to The Good Ride. I'm James Beastie. And if you can't try before you buy, you got these guys.
Yeah, you got us, baby.
And-
We're here for you.
And this is the Warca. What a great name. And I love this take. Has been doing shorter, wider boards, longer than almost anybody. And I love this take. We have the Orca next to it, of course. I wish I had a War Pig. Instead, another board so many people have asked us about, and that kind of somewhat sits in this similar family, you have the Dance Hall. But I'll be comparing this Warca against a few other boards as well. And I rode this primarily with Union Atlas and Burton Kendo. I got it in a wide variety of conditions, everything from some pretty firm and sometimes fair snow, some great groomers, some in-between groomers where it was firm but just fun almost everywhere. And then I even got it in some pretty deep powder, I would say knee-high. I was on the 150, Davey was on the 55.
Yep. And I got it in that epic powder day he just mentioned, and I also rode it in some amazing midwinter, springtime conditions out on Mammoth.
And to give you a short summary, this really feels centered, really feels between the feet. It feels almost like a true twin. It has a little bit of taper, but you don't really feel like you need to weight accordingly for a tapered board. It feels more like a double ender. It's got an interesting side cut that grips pretty well. It's a little mellower on the tail, a little more aggressive over the front foot grip-wise. And it's a very unique, mostly camber kind of ride that is super different from the Orca and much different from the Dance Hall. Probably a little more comparable to the War Pig and Super Pig, but still very much its own ride. And again, has been doing the short wide thing longer than all these other companies. This is just a good, aggressive mountain freestyle, kind of all mountain, kind of unique tapered directional board that has this just pop and drive like the standard on ink. But if you really want a tapered, directional, shortish, wideish feel, you might want to look elsewhere because that's not what this is. This is more of a centered mountain freestyle ride. And I didn't find it that great in powder, but I don't really think that's what they're going for here as much as how it performs everywhere else.
I think you hit it right on the head. For me personally, I thought it was really unique to have a board feel so centered, but also float as well as it did for me.
And when it comes to sizing, this 150, it felt perfect for me. I felt just right with the 150 for my boot size. And it's kind of an aggressive board, so being a little heavy for this for me at like 185 to low 190s, I liked it actually. I felt like I could control this board and use that weight to its advantage, and I didn't feel like I was overweighting this. I didn't feel like fat guy in a little coat. I felt pretty good there. Yeah.
I felt a little bit like a fat guy on a little board. My coat's baggy, baby, but the board might be a little small. I definitely felt like I was on the limit for the 55, the weight limit.
And when it comes to shape, this is tapered and directional, but it doesn't feel very tapered and it doesn't feel very directional. You feel kind of dead center in this board, and it's centered on side cut. And so even though there's some taper going on and some differences in the side cut where you have a more aggressive pronounced side cut here and a less pronounced like indentation, disruption in the side cut here, it doesn't feel very tapered, it doesn't feel very directional, and it really feels good between the feet. It's the kind of board you just flip around either direction and you're cool with. And then when you look at the camber profile, it's a pretty pronounced camber. They call it modern camber. It still has some early rise in the tip and tail for sure, but it's more on the camber side, and it's pretty locked in, pretty technical. Not as bad as full camber, but definitely a little harder to skid a turn, a little more catchy than most of the hybrid camber profiles out there today.
I thought it was good. It wasn't too catchy for me, and it was definitely forgiving. I found it to be on the easier side to skid a turn for as much camber as it has.
I think it has a very consistent feel in all conditions, everything from hard snow to soft snow. It has that same personality underfoot. Let's talk flex here with the 150. And overall, it's got a medium stiff flex. It's very stiff between the feet here. I'd say it's like on the softer side of stiff, but still so much more stiff than the rest of the board. Then you get into the nose, and you've got a little easier flex, and same with the tail. And just overall, there's a good flex to it. When you engage the board on snow, it has a nice balance between being easy to flex, much easier on snow than it is in the studio. And it has that balance between feeling rubbery and poppy that I really like out of Yes boards. And I thought there was really good pop to it.
Yeah, I agree. This thing has a lot of spring.
I could butter, okay. Took a little bit of work, but definitely doable. And it has this all conditions kind of ride where it's not the most powerful when it comes to just like powering through chunder and uneven snow. But if you mellow it out, the board doesn't pass up any real chatter into your joints, into your body. You feel good when you're on this board in all conditions, everything from hard, micro bumpy snow to messy, uneven snow. I always felt competent in this, and like I didn't feel like it was bucking and bouncing me around too much for a 150. So I thought that was great.
Yeah, I thought it did a great job of absorbing chatter. The day I had it on Mammoth, we were doing top to bottom laps, and we were getting all variable types of snow conditions, and this thing just charged through all of them. It was pretty hard to even notice too much of a difference from the brick ice on top to the chundery kind of mess in the middle and the little bit almost too sticky, too warm slush at the bottom. The thing just blasted through all of it.
And when it comes to speed and base glide, I think this board's pretty good in terms of base glide. It kept its speed well. It's not amazing. I've never felt like Yes boards are like up there with their sister company, Jones. For some reason, Jones bases just have much more glide to them than Yes. But Yes is no slouch. I think they do a really good job when it comes to keeping its speed and not getting too slow if you don't wax it too much. And you can point with this, but it's just not a bomber.
No, it's not. It's not like a bomber.
and like in comparison to the Orca too, I thought it had a faster base than the Orca. I think these two feel a little more stable at speed, mainly because of their camber profile. With the Orca, you kind of always have to be on edge, so it doesn't do this as you're going down the hill. But,
yeah.
And when it comes to edge hold, you get the Orca for edge hold, but this Warca is close. It's better than the Warpig for sure. This disruption in the side cut, I call this bipolar twin. It's kind of like the mid-bite technology. This mid-bite's really mellow here, but much more normal and pronounced here, like you get with the Greats and the Standard on Ink and a lot of other boards in their line. And I found that in really hard snow, if I really put a lot of front foot weight over this area, it gripped well. But if I leaned back into this, it definitely was bipolar. I really did notice that you have to front foot drive on harder snow. When it comes to the turning experience and the turn initiation, I thought this 150 turned really quick despite its kind of like wider width. What is it? A 26 centimeter waist for a size 9 boot is a little bit wide. But when you factor in the length, it kind of evens out a little bit. It's still not the fastest edge to edge, but once I got it on edge, it just engaged. And
Yep.
Especially in harder snow, if you really lean into that front part of the disruption in the side cut and really drive, it goes. And you can drive front footed. In better snow, you can drive centered and back footed. And it really has a fun kind of balanced ride when it comes to weighting your carves. And the overall turning experience I thought was pretty balanced. Maybe like all Yes boards, they lean a little bit on the more turny side, and I think that shows in this as well, but you can still do all kinds of turns, and I think it just leans a little bit more on the across the groomer to circle carve. but I love the spring out of the turn, and I thought this was my favorite part about this board.
Yeah, same here. I thought it was an amazing turner. And like Beastie just mentioned, it is a little bit more of a front foot heavy type of turner. And once you get that locked in, this thing is amazing.
And when it comes to powder, there is a centered stance on side cut, and there is very little setback on board. The only thing making this float okay, in my opinion, is probably the width and that little bit of early rise in the nose and the tail. When I got off the 155 pick your line on ink and got on this, I just felt like I was struggling. It was such a night and day difference. You know, that pick your line on ink is set back. You feel that taper more. It's got more nose and tail. You've got much more setback on board. I just felt like it was so much easier. And I felt like I was struggling on my back foot to keep it up. But I think it's all perspective. If you're comparing this, let's say, against a Camber twin, this is gonna kill it. But if you're comparing it against tapered directional rides like the Warca and the dance hall you see next to it, these guys just have so much more directional float. This is more for those of you who like to ride centered and you want something more aggressive than the greats, and you want more of that modern camber feel, and you want to just really launch, and you like that camber spring, and you know how to plane and keep your speed. I think that's what this board is more for. For me, it was lacking in powder the way I ride.
Yeah, if you like that set back directional float, this is not the #1 option.
And very doable switch. Just so easy. When you compare it to these guys, this just shines riding switch. This just shines hitting kickers. Even blows doors over the War Pig and the Super Pig. Those have that centered feel and that like tapered all mountain feel, tapered mountain freestyle feel. This feels even more centered and just so easy to ride switch. For those of you who hit big kickers and spin, this would be an excellent board for that. Jibs, it's a little stiff, and pipe, it's very doable as long as you're driving off that front foot and engaging that disruption in the side cut into that icy pipe wall. I think you're gonna be fine with this.
I got to take this out in the mini pipe at Mammoth. It's a 12-footer that we went through?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it was great. It was locked in, felt centered. I'm not getting that big of airs anyways, but I definitely was getting to my limit, and I felt very comfortable doing it.
Yeah, let's face it, we're kiddie park heroes at best.
Yep.
It's not who we are, but if you're that kind of person, I think you might really like it.
Nothing ruins my day more than seeing a 6th grader do a way bigger trick off the jump I'm hitting.
This board overall is really unique, really interesting, and while it didn't have the float and powder that I wanted, it had everything else. I just thought it was a very fun, very unique, kind of weird tapered twin that I had a time on.
Yeah, I think if you prefer a more centered free ride type of experience, then you're gonna really enjoy this board more. If you want something that's a little bit more set back and floaty, I would look at other options. But overall, this board is damp. It's springy out of the turn, poppy on the jumps, and it's stable when you land. And I think it is a really good quiver killer if you like more of a centered stance. When I was riding it, I almost forgot it wasn't a twin at times. If that's your style and you want to spin and do all that stuff, then it's a good option.